when you travel to different countries, every time you have to make new friends, and you have to make new business connections, and you have to do all. Then you start to know more and more people, and the more people you know, more you know that everybody's kind of the same. Whether you're from Poland or you're from Japan or you're from South America, I mean, fundamentally, we're here on this earth for a very short given time, and we're trying to make the best of it, right? And we all have problems. Everybody has problems, but because everybody has problems, you can help each other because of that, and that's what's really important.
Welcome to the Quest for Questions podcast. Joining me today is someone who was either thrown or intentionally threw himself into chaos since he was 5 years old. Taka went from trading on Wall Street for the likes of JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, through 17 years of investing for big-ass hedge funds, to finally starting and founding two businesses in the blockchain space. From moving back and forth between Japan and US since he was a little kid, to finally settling down with his family in Singapore. I promise you, he's seen it all, he's done it all, and he's as wild as an old tree. The 3 things you're gonna learn today: how to achieve mastery in any skill or pursuit in life based on ancient Japanese philosophy, how to think and what to do when starting a business and going on a path or becoming an entrepreneur. And finally, what we as Westerners can take away from the Eastern society, Eastern culture, and the Eastern way of life. We also touched on topics like the future and state of blockchain technology, Taka's future design podcast project, and a few other topics. This is Konrad, Yerba Addict, and here is an interview with one and only Takatoshi Shibayama. Enjoy. Welcome to the Quest for Questions podcast. I'm really excited to be talking to you today about blockchain investing, business, and in general like future of our society. I think it's gonna make for a really interesting conversation. So welcome. I guess the first thing that I would want us to dive into is for you to take us back to your Wall Street days, because you've worked on Wall Street for I think 18, 17 years for banks like JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. So maybe you can kind of give us paint us a picture of like what was it like, because now you have something completely different going for you. You are a big proponent of blockchain, and you have your blockchain business, and then you have a podcast trying to like kind of change, empower people and change the world. But you used to be a Wall Street person, which is, I would say, kind of the opposite word. So what was it like, back in that time? What was it like working on Wall Street, and what were like your what did you learn there?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. It's a great honor to be on fellow podcasts, creators, and it really gives me a huge opportunity to talk about myself and my story. So thank you again. So let me tell you about my story. So it's not something that's really glorious as a lot of people might think about. They think, oh, investment banks and Goldman Sachs and hedge funds and all these things, and you're making so much money. Well, initially, I was a poli-sci graduate, and I really didn't know myself. I didn't know what I wanted to do. But back in the days in 2001, this was around when the whole tech boom was happening. But at the same time, there was a lot of focus on going into banking, because that was what everybody wanted to do. You made money. There was a lot of awesome deals, M&A happening in the world. The whole world of trading was becoming bigger and bigger because of the deregulations that were happening in the industry. So there was a lot of money to be made. So just like anybody else, I thought, this is going to be a very big challenge for me, because I never felt like I really challenged myself academically. Of course, in Japan, where I grew up, the educational system was all about taking tests. You have an entrance exam to go into high school, university, and they get harder and harder. So obviously I was being academically challenged, but not in a way that I wanted to. And because I was having this big scare about myself of not being really good at math, and I could tell you up front, as a person that, trying to go into financing, having the lack of confidence in math is a big no-no for most interviewers. But I said, you know what? I'm just gonna fake it until I make it. I'm just gonna go and challenge myself and see if I can really make this thing happen. So in the
So you
first,
just to kind of clarify something for a second. So you are originally from Singapore, but you grew up in Japan, and then you moved to the US to work there on Wall Street.
no, I was actually born in Japan. I
Ah,
was
okay.
yeah, and then for my father's work, I moved to the U.S. when I was 5.
I see. Okay.
So hence the American accent.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. That.
yeah. So anyway, going back, and I said, you know what? I'm gonna challenge myself. So I got this job at J.P. Morgan as a FX option trader. Now, this is like the most challenging thing that I ever done in my life because when I sat down first day on my desk and I look across both sides of me, one guy was an MIT a PhD graduate in math, and I had another guy that was an Australian, British, but graduated as an undergrad in mathematics. And I was talking to these guys, and like, why am I actually sitting here with these math geniuses? This is like way too challenging for me. And I spoke to this MIT grad, and I asked him, what does it take to do this job? And how much math skills do I actually need? And he said, you know what, why don't you just ask the guy next to you? Because he's more of a math whiz than I am. And I was thinking, okay, this PhD guy from MIT is telling me this undergrad from math in an Australian university that I never heard of is more of a genius. So I talked to this guy and I asked him, okay, so why is this MIT guy telling you that you're more of a genius than he is, and he went to MIT? And he said, you don't need an education to be good at math. It's like, it's just a matter of knowing math. You just feel it. You just kind of get it. And I was like, holy cow, I am in the wrong seat. I am completely in the wrong seat. I gotta get out of here. And of course, I mean, when I sit down, they're talking to me about Black-Scholes models and all these difficult derivative products. And I was thinking, I just don't think I could challenge myself to this level. So interestingly, I did get fired for my first job. In a year and a half, I got fired because I really didn't understand what Black-Scholes was. I couldn't really get it in the end. And they told me I had to tweak it and I had to make my own, calculations and all that. So I said, I don't think I could do it. So I got fired and I was very discouraged. And I thought about leaving the industry, but I just wanted to stick to it, but maybe not in the derivative space. So I thought, let me look around in the finance industry and see what's something that I can do, and something I could get excited about, and also that makes good money. So at that time, in around early 2000s, Japan was going through its second decade of prolonged recession, and the Japanese banks were selling off their non-performing loans. Basically, what I mean is it's bad debt that they lent over the bubble years of the late 80s, and they held on to it for a whole decade. And with the external help of U.S. banks and other central banks of the world, the Japanese central banks were also told that they have to get rid of this unless you want to climb yourself out of recession. So they did all this disposal of bad debts, and Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch at the time, and a lot of these investment banks were approaching Japanese banks and buying huge amounts of portfolios of debt from them. They were $200 million size or $300 million size, and every semi-annually they will be selling these huge portfolios of bad debt. And what we do is we analyze each of those companies and decide, if these companies are able to make those payments, and if they can make some kind of payments, then how can I value it to the level where it makes sense for us to buy them, So that was kind of the thing, and then that became like my foundation of the finance industry that I grew up in, and I've done that all throughout the early 2000s, and then the global financial crisis happened in 2008, and that scene kind of changed quite a lot, and it became a lot more global. Tokyo has now become a more regional hub for finance. It moved over to Singapore and Hong Kong. So I moved to Singapore with a hedge fund to continue looking for companies that are in distress and making directional bets on them, whether they actually succeed or they die off. So that's kind of it in a kind of long story.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. So what are your like biggest I guess learning lessons maybe from the days in Wall Street? Because I'm sure maybe it wasn't like your, I don't know, maybe you like your life better now, but there's probably still lessons that you kind of took away from working in that space for quite a while, right?
For sure, for sure. There's a lot of things I learned. Technically, definitely, I've learned a lot about looking at companies' balance sheets, how to analyze them, cash flow models. I mean, these are a lot of the academic things that I've learned. And initially, I thought I could just do it, but the thing is, it's not that easy. At least for me, it was not easy. So for me, I thought I need to be a lot more humble about my confidence and really try to understand the math behind or the philosophy behind why companies were valued in a certain way. And you can't do that just by picking up a book and say, okay, I'll just follow this because every company is different. And so I would have a lot of discussions with teammates around me. There was a lot of ego with a lot of people that prevented them to say, I don't know, I don't understand this. Can I do this? But just stepping down from that ego and saying, you know what, I'd rather be humble about it and say, I don't know, please teach me. And I want to be able to dissect this to a very small minimum size as possible so that I can really understand it. So just going back to the first job that I had, and this really smart guy next to me, he was telling me, if you can't explain something in a very simple manner without jargons and not hiding behind all these technical methods that you just learned, and you can't explain it to a normal person, that doesn't mean that means that you don't understand it. So
Yeah.
I took that at heart, and I really took that at heart, and I went and tried to dissect everything that I didn't understand and just play with it. Just do it over and over again. I'll just make a hypothesis. I'll just make an example. I'll just make a new thing, even though it's not real. I'll just make a certain situation. Say, okay, what if this happens? Okay, what am I gonna do? And then I'll just make another example and just create my own problems, and then keep solving it until I could do many different types of problems until I felt confident about doing it. That's
Nice.
kind of, yeah, for me, that was kind of lesson number one for me.
Yeah, like the explain it. How do you say that? It's like explain it to a fifth grader or something, or explain it to a 5-year-old. Depend who you listen to, but yeah, I think this is a really important aspect of anything. Like if you want to, I think, really be good at communicating, you can't just be like, I think, good at what you do. You also have to learn how to explain it to people, and that means like breaking it down to like these core basic elements, right? And then once you understand those basics, and then you can figure out where you don't have the knowledge, like where it's missing, and then you can go back and make sure to fill those holes, and then you can finally explain something to someone. But that's definitely a very valuable skill. um so what I'm interested in is how does someone go from there to then have an idea about like blockchain, like what goes through your mind to go in this whole world of blockchain. um like what was happening, like what were your thoughts at the beginning when you were getting into it, and and what's still going through your mind that you stuck with it for such a long time, like what excites you most about a blockchain?
Hmm. So I think I need another different story on top of that. So as I progressed in this world of investing, and I went from investment banks, and then I moved on to the hedge fund world, and I looked at I was responsible for the investments in Asia, and I was looking at Japan, Australia, different types of regions and different types of business cultures. There's so many things to learn there, and as I gained experience in how people think in different areas, then I started my own hedge fund with another partner of mine, and we ran that for about 2 3 years. Well, for me, we started out with a smaller capital, and we grew that into a $1 billion hedge fund, and that was a pretty big accomplishment for me. And I kind of thought, I think, I'm kind of done. I feel like I've done whatever I needed to do. I mean, obviously, when I spoke to my parents about that, or my mother about it, and said, "Well, I mean, isn't this the time that you're gonna start? All these fruits are gonna start bearing, and you're gonna be picking them. You just grew the tree, and you see the fruits, and now you're not gonna eat it and just walk away." And it's probably true. And for me, I always kind of valued challenging myself more important than actually the fruit or tasting that fruit for a very long period of time. And
And where do you think that
that's
belief comes from?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, as a child, I was always thrown into chaos. So if I step away from my career and just talk about my personal life, I was born in Japan, moved to the U.S. when I was 5, and this is like in the early 1980s. It's a different period, right? And I went to Long Island, New York, and this area that we moved into was an extremely white neighborhood. I would say 60% were Jewish people and 40% were Americans, and it was just me. And I didn't speak the language, obviously, and I was thrown into kindergarten, and I had to learn English through just learning. I mean, there wasn't any side school that I went to and learn and helped me learn English. I have to learn normally. So I think being thrown in that kind of chaos creates that kind of challenge to grow yourself, right? And then when I moved back to Japan, it was the same. I was very poor in my language skills in Japanese by then. I spent 10 plus years in the U.S. in a very Americanized neighborhood. Obviously, I went to like a weekend school for Japanese, but I stayed away from all the Japanese cultures because I didn't understand it. I was so immersed with the local life that I had that I just didn't really connect with the rest of the Japanese people who are only going to be living there for a couple of years and move out. So when I moved back to Japan, and that was another culture shock to me as well. I mean, the Japanese culture, American culture, you could say they're extremely different. One, prioritize the individual, where the other one is all about society and consensus, and the way you interact with people, everything's different. So at that age, it's still very, I would say vulnerable and more, I guess, generally fragile mentally, and being thrown into again another culture where you have to recreate yourself. You have to hold what you have, but you have to mold yourself into the society so that you can fit in. You can't be the Americanized Japanese guy in a very Japanese society. I mean, they didn't really allow me to be that. So, having this constant changes in life creates this chaos, and learning to live within that chaos and challenging yourself to pull yourself out of it. And I think that's kind of what I always kind of strive for now. Now that I think about the many challenges that I've created for myself, that's kind of what I always wanted. So I didn't want to rest on my laurels and say, well, I've done this, so let me just, like enjoy this for a long time and get lazy. I mean, that's kind of not really what I wanted to do. So I wanted to throw myself every time in a deep end and see how I come out.
So let's dive deeper into it. Like we will get back to the blockchain stuff, but let's figure, because I think this is where you can also share maybe about the mental models you have for like both business, investing, but also general like life and physical health and stuff like that. So
Mm,
I imagine like that you had to overcome so many, instances where you're thrown into chaos or into new situations, and you overcame them. That you must have had some recipe at some point. You figured out some recipe, okay, how to deal with those things, how to make decisions, how to think about challenges, and then how to think about problems and then solutions, like things like that. So maybe let's dig into that. So what are those, you would say, like what's your
mm.
recipe?
Yeah, when I think about it and when I tell people, it sounds extremely boring. But this is how I approach things, and this is the same how I approach sports, music. I play an instrument as well, and it's to me they're all the same. So as I said in the beginning, you have to simplify things. You have to break things down into very small pieces and understand every little element of it, so that you can really conceptually understand. So this is what I consider the base start for everything. So when you throw yourself into a chaos, and you have to look around and think, how can I simplify this moving, kind of dark thing that I'm kind of confronted with. What do I have right now, and what don't I have to adapt to this? And I have to think about, okay, what is it that I really need to get out of this? So that's kind of how I try to think about things at first. And then once I understand that, then you have to get your body to, or your mind to, be able to function without you actually thinking about it. So this is like the same with sports and music as well. So repetition, it's boring, but you just repeat over and over again. And remember I said about, thinking, when I didn't understand a certain thing about investing, and I'll try to create problems myself and then just practice over and over again, right? I mean, that's kind of what it is. I mean, for sports or music or investing, everything is about repetition. Repeat until your body just can function without you even thinking about it. So
Can you
every
give an
time
example of like this theoretical problem that you would create? Because like it's I think
yeah,
easier to picture
sure, okay.
something like physical or real, but how would you do it
Yeah.
in more
Okay.
like
Well, since I talked about the work part, so let's talk about sports then. So let's think about sports. So I've done swimming, I've done race skiing in my past, and currently for the last 9 years I've been practicing jujitsu. And jujitsu is a sport where it was for the listeners who don't know what it is, it's like grappling with a karate gear on. So basically what we do is not just throw the opponent, but when we get to the ground, you need to figure out a way to submit the other person, rather in, let's say, strangulation or breaking the joints. So you have to move in a way that you have to get rid of the legs, who are kind of in between you and the opponent, their legs, and then get to the upper body, and then try to find a way that you can get the arms or the neck to strangle. So everything is very calculated in that sense. Obviously there's a lot of spontaneous moves there, but generally it's more, we call it like a human chess. So we have to think about what's our next move, or we need to think about 3 moves ahead to get to where we want to go. So when we practice this, we practice techniques in how to do a certain moves, and we practice that over and over, and then we think about different variations to it. So it's almost like a diagram where you have, if I do this, the response they'll probably get from the opponent will be A, B, and C. So if it's A, then it's A, like this, I don't know, D, E, and F. This is and then it just keeps going, right? So we practice that in our head and our bodies over and over till everything becomes muscle memory. So that's how we do it. Same thing as I think is playing an instrument as well. You try to play a piece, you probably get stuck at a certain point, you stop, and then you break it down. Why was this a little fast? How did it do it so fast? So maybe I'll make it really slow and practice that over and over until I could do it really fast. It sounds extremely boring and tedious, but I think that's really the essence of everything, is that until you can actually do everything without even having to think about it, but you have to put in that time. You have to put in so much time until your body remembers that it can do it without you even thinking about it. And that's kind of number two for me. And then yeah, and then three is, then how do you put that into real practice, right? So you have to throw yourself into those situations. Whether if you're a sport, you're doing sports, you got to compete. If you're doing if you're doing an instrument, you have to go out and do a concert, or go out in front of somebody else and play it, and then you have to test yourself. So if it's in business, then you practice on the side, away from your business time or something, and then you go out and test your theories. You test your what you learned, and then put it into real practice. So I think that's kind of how I look at a lot of things, which, again, I said it might be boring, but that's what I think what mastery is to me. And yeah, I mean, we have a word in Japan called takumi, and takumi means mastery of craftsmanship. And what we do is, it's the same. You have like let's say everybody thinks of samurais and stuff and ninjas in Japan, right? So let's say like a swordsman in Japan, all he does is makes a sword, right? So he practices every day. Can I make it even sharper? Can I make it even harder? And he'll practice over and over again. He'll make another sword. He'll make another sword, and keep doing it until he gets the finest sword that he can ever make. And I think that's the same with anything that you confront in life.
Okay. No, for me, I mean, maybe for some people it's boring. For me, it's not. But and I think for hopefully for people listening, it's not either. So there are basically three like mental models, or like three steps for you. One is like breaking it down to the simple, like the simplest fundamentals of that given thing you're trying to do. So is it learning an instrument, learning a martial art, or learning something in business, or investing? Then it's basically practicing that over and over again, either kind of in real life or just an imagination, like thought experiment. And then finally doing it, like the third one you mean is like going out there and trying to kind of find challenges, right? That's the third one. That's what you
Yeah,
mean.
and testing out whatever you've done in the 1, 2 steps is for real. And then if it doesn't work, go back and do it over again.
I like going to the ring.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So how through that lens, how would you look at something like, let's say, business, like the world of business, through that lens? Like, how did you approach it, and uh, what do you recommend other people, like how can they apply this to, for example, if they want to now they're thinking about starting a business, um or just generally maybe some startup, or starting some new endeavor, like how through those lens of those three
Hmm.
mental models, like how would you say in practice they can approach this?
Yeah, I think the core thing is to simplify things, right? I think, maybe in the Western world, people value multitasking quite a lot. You gotta be able to do many things at the same time. I'm actually quite the opposite. So I like to focus on one single thing and try to be really good at it. So, if you're starting up a business and you know what your core competence is, then try to focus on that one thing hard, and try to outsource the other things. Whether it might cost a little bit of money, but if you have the money, try to outsource all the things that you don't want to do, as so that because it distracts you from doing that one thing that you do well. So let's say you're really good at marketing, but you're not very good at admin. You don't like to manage people. You don't want to take care of the finances. You don't want to raise capital. I mean, those things you can outsource that to a certain degree to another person. So if you're starting out with just 2 people, tell your other partner, I want to do this. This is what I'm very good at. You find another person who's really good at the other things, And that's how you construct your team in the beginning. You have to be able to maximize your strength with the given limited time that you have. I mean, we only have 24 hours in a day. You don't have enough time to do this and that. And if you do this and that, everything is going to be mediocre. You know, the outcome is going to be mediocre. So find a way to, focus your time at the most efficient way possible.
Okay, okay. And then at some point, and then practice that over again, and then at some point, like go into real world and try to, I guess, test if your ideas or your theories or your hypothesis make sense, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think in the entrepreneurship world, you talk about product market fit quite a lot. So, you test it out every single, you tried with the other people, and you talk to your friends, your family, or whoever is in your vicinity and test that theory out. If it doesn't work, go back again, redo it. I think it's just a repetition of doing that until you can find that one thing or the, several things that you really want to birth into this world.
Mm, okay. And talking about entrepreneurship, which is a difficult word and quite fancy word in general. It feels like in English the word entrepreneur. It's like it's very like
Hard
fancy.
to spell too.
Yeah, hard to spell. I don't know how it became so popular and that there's no easier word. But anyway, like what would you say? Because I think you've got quite a good kind of point of view on that, and you're also now like running your own thing, and you didn't really have like previous experience, like some family of business owners, I assume.
No.
So what do you think is like one biggest kind of misconception that people have about being an entrepreneur or becoming an entrepreneur or entrepreneurship? Like one thing that I guess maybe most people in that space agree with, but you would disagree with them with. Maybe there is something like that comes to your mind.
Mm. Well, I don't think many people disagree, but we kind of neglect because as a entrepreneur, you're so positive that you can make it. I mean, obviously, if you don't have that, you're not going to start it out to begin with. But at the same time, you have to be rational as well, right? And a lot of times, we know the fact that probably 98% of the companies that get started all disappear within 1 year or 2 years. But we think that those 1 to 2% people, we just look at them because that's the only ones that are remaining, and we think, okay, well, entrepreneurship, you gotta make it big. You gotta raise more capital. You're gonna be Jeff Bezos, but it never happens. And you're just talking to me right now after 2-3 years of entrepreneurship, and there were so many times that I felt like I went broke. Right now, it's not like I've massively succeeded at this point, but I'm still keeping the business going. And thing is, even though you have this huge amount of passion, and you love the chaos, you love the challenge, you have to hold on to that because that's the only thing that you really have. And along the way, there's always going to be people or yourself doubting that you can't make it, and then you're being proved that you actually can't make it because not people are not going to like your product, people are not going to like your ideas, and there's I would say, like, you're living amongst negativity most of the time.
Yeah.
Always there's hardly any positive signs of anything for most of the part, especially when you're starting out. And when you see a little bit of positive, you want to latch onto it and think that that's gonna make it happen. But again, it's not gonna happen. You're gonna be turned down again, and you're gonna keep happening like this. And especially like in the COVID times that we have now. I mean, my business, when it got into COVID, I mean, all the projects died out, and I had to restart, think about what I need to do again, and then try to adjust within the environment that I'm in right now. Again, chaos, but you have to simplify things again. You have to reduce staff and think, okay, what can I do with the limited amount of time and capacity that I have with myself, and keep going. I mean, these things always happen all the time, and I know that a lot of people say this, and you probably hear it in other podcasts or articles, and all the time, but that's always like in the back of your head, and then you think it's not going to happen to me, but it happens. It always happens, and you have to be able to stomach that, right? I mean, I have two kids, and a wife. I can't. I have this thing that I can't go broke completely. I mean, I have to put bread on a table, right? So, it's a huge challenge for me to keep a young company going, and then also facing bankruptcy all the time. So,
Is that
it's
what
something
keeps
that
you
you really need
going?
to stomach.
Like your
Do I enjoy?
family?
No, my family is not enjoying that at all. I mean, obviously, but
No, I
the
mean, like, is that what keeps you going? Because you say you
Mhm.
gotta find something and latch onto it, and even though like most people still in the
Yeah.
long run are gonna maybe fail or not succeed to that extent. So like, what keeps you going? Is that like putting the bread on the table, or is there something else?
No, it has to be a much bigger purpose than that. I mean, obviously that's a huge purpose. I mean, I need to be able to provide for the family, but I would say that's 30-40% of why I'm doing this. The other part is that, I just enjoy doing it. I wouldn't think of anything else. I like the challenge and I want to prove myself. I don't know why, but that's kind of why I keep doing it.
Mm, okay, okay. Um, No, it's definitely, I think, and one thing that's why I try to talk about it on the podcast is that there's this thing that a lot of people kind of overlook in this whole, starting your own business or becoming an entrepreneur world. It's like this, looking up to the success, because that's what's shown everywhere, and that's what's kind of like, hyped, and that's what everyone strives for. But we gotta kind of understand, and that's what I'm trying to also show here through those stories, is that you know most people are not gonna get there, and that it's and doesn't mean that you shouldn't aim for it. Like, if you want, if that's your goal, that's cool, but understand that you're probably gonna fall somewhere, hopefully, between that, maybe failure and that huge success, and that most of it is gonna be challenging. So you somehow, one way or another, you gotta find some, like, passion or love or some fulfillment from that challenge, just the challenge itself, because the reward, it may come, but it may never come, right?
Exactly. And most of the time it doesn't. So you have to be ready for that, right? And you have to have some kind of fallback plan somewhere or another to keep yourself going. I mean, I've taken on like part-time jobs just to make sure that if my company goes bust, then I could do something else. I advise hedge funds as a part-time, also help out other friends who are in the entrepreneurship space that I could provide, a little bit of my expertise on certain things, just so that I can have a side income, so that if my real business doesn't do well, then I still have something that I can bring bread to the table. So, obviously it's not the best use of my time, but I need to figure out, if I don't succeed, then I need to be make sure that at least my family is taken care of.
Yeah, so it's like this, and that's this common theme of like calculated risk. It is taking a risk, but also like kind of calculated. Like, you still try to minimize the downside as much as possible, and that's what I've seen from most people who approach, going about like starting a business or trying to grow their business or their own brand or something. They, like most people who go about it in a smart way, they kind of try to minimize the downside as much as possible, or reduce their kind of living costs, or stuff like that, where they don't have to always grow and improve every month, because the future is so unknown that like, if you are worried about it, I think also all the time, that you want to work 100% efficiently, because you're gonna have that fear all the time. I feel
Mm.
like this.
Yeah, I mean, for people who just want a comfy life, I mean, this is really not for you, right? I mean, this is the most volatile thing that you could do to your life. I mean, obviously, you could just do a 9 to 5, although there's probably not that many 9 to 5s these days. But you could do your normal job, collect your paycheck, and then think about the weekends or the vacations and live for that. But I always think that that life is too short to just think about a short time frame of just the weekends and when you retire. I mean, that's like you just consumed all your life doing, things that you didn't want to do. So, yeah, I mean, but again, as I said, I mean, thing is, it's also I find that in the entrepreneurship mindset that a lot of people think before going into it is that you can scale your business so fast, and this whole idea of like VCs feeding into you that you got to grow super fast, blitz scale, whatever it is, and grow as big as possible, and then exit. And that's a very investor mindset that they feed you into, right? So I've been in the finance industry too, and in the hedge fund space. Obviously, my time frame was much shorter than VCs, and I needed to know that I could make money within the next 3 months, or I had different time horizons for many investments. This has to be done in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. If it doesn't work, then exit. So VCs obviously have their timeline as well, and the more quickly that they can exit their position, the higher the returns are. And then they can show their LPs or their investors that they've done a good job and raise more money and enhance more management fees and make more money off of that. So that's what they really care about. They don't really care about, if you have a very sustainable business model or not. So I think for people who are wanting to do these kind of things, if you're really doing it for short-term gains, you want to, blitz scale and exit in 3 years and make a lot of money and do it over again. I mean, that's really only for a handful of people, right? And probably even less than a handful of people. A lot of times, the entrepreneurship is always about growing a sustainable business that you can grow organically and keep yourself out of this kind of once you got a business going and you add more employers onto your team, you got to think about the welfare of them and your vendors and all these companies that are kind of attached to your business, and make it a safe environment for them too, right? I mean, you're the one who's taking the risk. I mean, the other people might are just coming in because they want to have a decent job. So if you want them to have a decent job and you don't take a huge amount of risk to blow up your business. So I think initially you have to go into the mindset of thinking, how can I sustainably grow this business organically? And I think that's the safer way to do this.
Yeah, that's very well said. Like grow, but also like I think the important part is also like start it organically, right? Like that, not have to rely on some, fundraising or some, investment fund or some investors investing into me. But first, create a better version of what you try to do and just implement it. Try to sell it to one person. Try to get first customer like organically.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think and if it does happen to blitzscale, if it does happen that VCs are really interested in your business and all of a sudden you get a lot of money, then great. But then you shouldn't go into entrepreneurship thinking about that as the main, motive.
Yeah, because I think it also has very many downside. Like look at all those companies that are considered those that like made it work so fast, so huge, like Facebooks and others. Like I wouldn't say they are example now of the best, best in terms of like customer service, best in terms of like ethics. Like it's like very, yeah, the person at the top made a lot of money, but do you want to be, do you want to sacrifice all those other things for that? Like that's, I think, also a very important thing to keep in mind. No.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, think about like what did they really innovate? I mean, what did Facebook really innovate? If you're really into the whole innovation thing and you want to really, create something extremely different and make an impact to this world, Facebook is not an innovative company, right? And is Google innovative? No. I mean, there were other internet browsers before them, so it's not like they innovated anything. Did Apple really innovate something? Yes, in the beginning they really did, and after that it was all about design. And those, or Jeff Bezos, I mean, or Amazon, did they innovate anything? not really. I mean, people were selling books way before way before time, right? And you just put it on the internet. I mean, that's not innovation. I mean, the real innovation is something very different. And I think what people really latch onto is that they want to, be the next Amazon or be the next Facebook, but it's there's to me there's not a lot of purpose behind that business. And for me, principle and purpose is so much more important to me than just building a huge business and making a lot of money. And so it's you got to find a real purpose. And I think that's what's really important for me is what can you do to like make the society better. And I could go back to why blockchain, because we kind of deviated from that quite a lot. But when I thought about why do I want to do blockchain, or why I did like about cryptocurrencies in the beginning, is that it was a way for people, let's say in like Argentina or Venezuela or in many of these countries where they don't have other forms of savings other than their own currency or US dollars. And a lot of times, they have to rely on banks to save that money. They're not going to hide it under their mattress at home. So when you rely on, these authorities, and these authorities may or may not be in their intention, but they do mess up quite a lot. And if you're in these situations where you can't control your monetary destiny, and you have to take matters under control. And I think that Bitcoin at that time, when I first looked at, or sorry, not the first time, but multiple times I looked at it, and what it really clicked was, this is a way for people to save money in a more secure way, in some way. I mean, obviously there was a lot of volatility in the beginning, but these technologies mature at some point, so the volatility will stabilize. And when that happens, this is a better form of people to park money somewhere or remit money somewhere else, because you don't have to rely on central institutions. And that to me seemed like a huge purpose to me, to help people be able to access that kind of way of living.
Okay, that's so that's like why blockchain. That's very. Yeah, and like, what are your thoughts on the development of blockchain? Like, how do you see it heading? Like, what do you think is now the status of it? Like, how
Yeah, I
far do
think
you think we are from it being like something more in our everyday life? And what do you
yeah.
see in the next like 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
6 months is like eternity in the crypto world. So it's hard to say what would happen in 5 years and 10 years, because that's like,
Okay.
like multiple generations of people in the industry. But initially, Bitcoin did start out with the philosophy that I was telling you about. But it did change quite a lot and became really a speculative investment class for speculators. I mean, a lot of people got into this trying to make quick money, and parading, ICOs. I don't know if a lot of the listeners know what it is, but people are creating, cryptocurrencies out of thin air and saying, well, this is going to be the next Bitcoin, or I built this business and you can use these cryptocurrencies on my platform, and you're going to make a lot of money. And it was a very very volatile time for cryptocurrency. You've seen the price go up to Bitcoin price go up to nearly $20,000, and then it crashed down to like $3,000. That was in the 2017-18 period when everybody started really hearing about cryptocurrency. But after that, I think a lot of things changed. I think that a lot of sketchy people have slowly exited the business, and people who really innovative, no, I wouldn't say innovative, I would say more excited about the philosophy did stick around. People had ideas about what decentralized finance should be. I use a little bit of technical term, but basically it's the same concept: no central authority, and you could be provided with financial services without having any authority on top. And that kind of concept has slightly taken off a little bit these days. And also your traditional institutional investors, like macro investors who invest in gold, have started to look at Bitcoin as a alternative to gold. They call it a digital gold. It does carry the same characteristics in the way that it has limited supply, and it's away from central institutions. And gold has always been a hedge for doomsday scenarios. And it's really the only asset class that really held its value for many, many years. Uh, and and the way that we see now with the massive printings of money from many developed countries, central banks, a lot of people are re-examining or re-evaluating the precious metal that everybody over the millennia have adored and loved, and Bitcoin has become a more digital version of that. And I see a lot of gold investors and macro investors looking at Bitcoin as a that kind of investment asset class. And I've seen a lot of the finance industries build businesses around that. So let's say custody business of cryptocurrency, or obviously there's been exchanges and such, but make it more institutional grade so that more and more traditional investors can get into this space and hold on to it carefully. So now we've seen a lot less volatility in the market, but there's been a lot more proper people coming into the industry. So I see that the concept of Bitcoin changed quite a lot, but it has gone into different multiple directions, which I think is quite natural for a technology with a life of its own now.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely has come through some interesting evolution, and yeah, I think that there was also a lot of like Ponzi scheme, like kind of recruiting people under each other and that type of stuff. So so I think you're right. But what would you say to people, because I think Bitcoin and in general the cryptocurrency is like very much a polarizing topic, in a way that there is this like hardcore believers on one hand, and then there's like these people who call it, I would say, worthless digital gold or something like along those lines. I mean, I'm just playing a devil's advocate. I'm kind of just somewhere in the middle, personally. So what would you say to those people that just say like, okay, well, you in theory, yes, it could be maybe some new gold, but again, gold has something that's physical, like tangible, right? That's tangible. That's why supposedly it has maintained its value throughout, like thousands and thousands of years, because it's a perception that of people that creates the value of something. But then this is very tangible, so in those worst times, like when all goes to hell in the economy, then you have something physical. So how do you think something that's it's so non-tangible on like Bitcoin, or in general cryptocurrency, can replace gold in such a way? What would you
I don't
say?
think it will. I don't think it will replace gold. I mean, I think gold will always be there. And some people say, gold, Bitcoin is the millennials' gold, but I don't find that to be true. I find that yes, gold is physical. So let's say in an extreme doomsday scenario when all lights go off, then there's no use for Bitcoin because you can't even send it anywhere. There's no electricity. So obviously, gold is going to be there for sure, to be the most important asset class, but it's not transferable very easily, right? So if you have a gold bar in your safe and you want to exchange it for something, you can't take a whole bullion and try to trade it for something. It's too big, and you can't make little. Are you going to shave it and try to sell it? I mean, it's not really practical in that sense. Whereas you have Bitcoin, you can shave it into small bits. They're called satoshis, and you can sell it. You can use it. It's transferable much easier than gold. So I think that in a way there is some kind of intrinsic value. Well, I won't use the word intrinsic, but there is none. But it's ultimately the value is in the eyes of the beholder, right? So if you really believe in it, and there's plenty of people now believing it, I think it has created its own asset class. And to the non-believers, I think that there are non-believers of gold as well. I know a lot of people who hold no value to gold. Even Warren Buffett, for the longest time, saw no value in gold until very recently. So there are people who just flat out don't invest in gold. So I think, it could be the same for Bitcoin. I mean, it's, not every single asset class is for everybody.
I see. But do you think that the future, that there is some like version of the quite near future, let's say, that would involve us actually, being able to pay for things with Bitcoin and kind of have it as like a substitute for the normal fiat currencies?
Oh, it's already happening, right? And it's a matter of whether the merchants want to accept it or not. I mean, the infrastructure is already in place. So yes, it might not be Bitcoin, it could be some other cryptocurrency, but I think it now has already created a world for itself to be accepted if people really wanted to see value in it. So, as I said, the infrastructure is already there.
Mm. Yeah, I guess the biggest problem is that, well, with the whole cryptocurrency, but mostly Bitcoin, where you kind of going against the governments. So, well, like if we can win that fight, then I think it can be mass adopted. But I think the if is the problem, right? Like, can we win it?
Well, let's say like in certain countries, the government is already taxing people when they acquired and made money off of Bitcoin. So in a way, they're already approving it as an investment class.
Oh, in
And
Poland, I think that's the case even. I think
yeah, so in Singapore we don't have that, but let's say in Japan or U.S. also has taxes around it. So and there's more and more regulations around it. The SEC in the U.S. or the the equivalent in Japan already controls the crypto exchanges. So in a way, that's kind of a, I wouldn't say thumbs up, but they've already accepted it. And now these days, a lot of governments are thinking about digital currencies based on cryptocurrency, and
Mm.
I think that's a deviation from what Bitcoin originally was set out to be, like a complete opposite. But they already acknowledge the technology. They already acknowledge that Bitcoin is already out there and it's taxable and controllable. So I don't think it's really a matter of if anymore.
Mm. Yeah, I think the new news was that like PayPal now started like dealing
Yeah,
with it. So
yeah,
that's, I think, pretty big. No, PayPal is a
yeah.
big player.
Totally. And then there's going to be more and more. Recently in Singapore, there's a bank called DBS Bank. They have already launched a service to provide Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies against fiat currencies. And so, if a retail bank that's very respectable in Singapore already is offering digital currency or cryptocurrency services, then I think it's gone pretty much mainstream at this point.
Mm, yeah, that's true. That's true. Let's no, let's hope. Let's see where it goes. I'm optimistic. But I'm still kind of somewhere, not a big, like, I'm not telling people, hey, this is a near future, but personally, I don't know about all the other ones, but I think Bitcoin is the one that might stand a chance. I think all the other ones kind of low chance, maybe, but I think this one has enough momentum that it's possible that it can change a bit of how things work in the world. But I wanted to switch gears a little bit, because one thing that I would really want us to explore, and I think that's gonna have a big impact on all the listeners, is that you have this like kind of unique experience in life and perspective where you lived in two quite opposite cultures, which one is like Japan and one is US, and in different periods of your life. So I think I'm because I personally traveled myself and also to like totally different cultures, and I know how much it had impacted me, and then how it's changed my perspective. When I would live somewhere else, I would always like think, oh, these guys do it this way, and I would just take some things from that culture and implement it for myself, and or say like, oh, it would be great if here we would do it. So I'm curious, like, what are your some maybe let's start with like, what are your um like when it comes to like culture, or like I think culture is where we would settle this, is what are your like favorite culture things that you learned or adopted from the Western, like the US, and then from Japan? And what are like the big maybe differences you see now that you know lived here quite a long time, lived here quite a long time?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting question. And I think about that a lot myself. I don't really break it down to this quality is this and this quality is that, but I do feel like I'm a very mixed, personality in that sense, taking different elements from different cultures. And now I live in Singapore for about the last 11 years, a little bit in Hong Kong during that time as well, but and also lived in the UK for a bit as well. So it's been an amazing experience being able to live in different cultures and countries, meeting people from all over the world, and it made me very open to accept anything that I think is easy for me to comprehend that I should have as a quality as a person. So let's say like in Japan, I mentioned that it's a very consensus driven society. Everybody tries to look after other people more respectable, at least on the surface they try to respect other people so that there's a certain harmony in society, and I really like that a lot because it does at least let us be able to live with each other with compassion. And I think that's really important quality that everybody should have. And if you look at very individualistic societies, I could take U.S. I wouldn't say that they're not compassionate. Obviously, there are compassionate people, many, many of them. But if the most important thing about yourself is the individual, and the individual is taken to the extreme where you can even define that as being selfish, then I don't think that really fits with society. I mean, you'd rather just live by yourself, right? And so I don't believe in, like extreme individualism. I don't believe in extreme libertarianism either. And I think that one should really value, living and making, your own decisions yourself and try to live individually as much as possible if it doesn't hurt other people, right? And sacrifice other things. And there's always like a difficult balance that you need to find there. And I think Europe had like a very interesting mix of people who had the similar type of qualities as Japanese people, the consensus driven kind of thing, where and the individual as well. And I felt quite at ease when I had a when I mingled with a lot of people there. And yeah, so I think those are things that I think about quite a lot, like the individual versus the society, and and I think that's becoming like a very big focus for our world today as well. I mean, one side you see, in a certain country, everybody's screaming that they don't want to put on masks and they don't care about, or maybe they're thinking that the science does not prove it. But if you're let's say in a pandemic situation like now, and you have to think about stopping the spread of the disease, and you have to think about others, but at the same time, if you're so individualistic that you don't want to listen to the government, you don't care about other people just because you don't want to wear a mask. I mean, I think that's a little bit extreme in my view. So these I think these when everybody's in suffering, it really brings out your real character, and that's when you're like really being tested. So, and then in times you do have to think about society, and you have to think about the well-being of each other, the planet as well. And then sometimes when things are peaceful and you could do whatever you want, then go out and do it. But always have this mentality that you as an individual can't live without the society either, and you have to create a good balance with it. And I think I kind of learned that pretty well over the time that I lived in different countries.
Mm. No, that's I love this because I love this topic because yes, as you said, it's one, it's a hard balance. Two, I think it's one, like it's like this high level topic that not many people talk about, and I think it's just this, in a way, the fact that for the past like well, we could say depends on where you live, but for the most part, like maybe 80 years or something, since or 70 years from the Second World War, the world was relatively peaceful. In a
Hmm.
way, it's blessing, but I think in the on the other hand, it's also the catalyst for why now we are at such a point, especially in the Western world. So part of Europe and US especially, it's like this like heavy emphasis on individualism, because that's what I think like those peaceful times somehow they push towards, like, okay, like more your own kind of freedom, do what you want, all that stuff. And then people don't have to unite anymore, and in a way it's great because yeah, we have peaceful times, let's make most use of it. But now we see that when something happens, and it always does, then it's actually not the best to just care about your individual self and put it above everything else. And I think this is a really interesting kind of perspective that you have, because you have from both the Asian countries, which in general, well, depends which ones, but a lot of them have that kind of culture and society above the individual. It's kind of similar. I have more experience with like South America, for example, and for me, it's not as it's in a bit different way, but still, like, people, like, the most important thing there is to like the people. People are like your relationships with people, and maintaining that, and somehow, even here in Poland, which is not as westernized and as like UK, US, it's not as far along in the progress. I still see that a lot, that unfortunately, like, just like everyone became so about themselves, then now, like, when something happens like this, people don't know how to unite anymore. They don't know how to fight some cause together. Everyone's super divided. So um yeah, like, what do you think is the solution? Do you think it's like, people should kind of experience, like, you maybe, how it is to be in Japan, and how it is there, and then they will get different perspective, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think that, look, I mean, I think a lot of people, it depends on where you are and what kind of attachment you have to your own society as well, right? So a lot of us moved around and live in urbanized locations, and I'm kind of guessing a lot of your listeners probably might be somewhat similar. You might be from the suburbs or rural areas, and you seek a job in urban areas. And then what you start to see is that become very detached from your environment, and you become detached from any neighborhoods that you had when you were growing up, and you live in a place where you don't know anybody, and you might be a single, you might have a family, but in really, there is no local community, right? And you're living in your own apartment, your own house, and everybody else is kind of a stranger. You go to work, come back, and all you do is think about, putting bread on your table, keeping your family happy. And now, we kind of lose that sense of like how to relate to everybody else around you, because most of the time you're just working, and that's a working relationship. And your friends, you're probably halfway across the world, or you're in a different location in your country, and you're connected by Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is. So you're kind of like hooked on that because you want to keep your connections with other people, not making friends around you, right? And
Yeah.
and when then we go and you start to have that kind of void, like the sense of disconnection. And when you have that disconnection, then you try to fill that void with something else, whether it be materialistic desires, or you want to just be on social media all the time, Netflix or whatever it is that fills your void, because you have that detachment. And what I think really needs is that you need to be out there a lot more. You have to make more connections, make more real friends, stop playing video games, and try to, connect with other people, and then find out what other people's sufferings are. What are other people's difficulties in life are, and you find that weakness in other people, and you learn to accept it, and you think that everybody else is actually really the same as you fundamentally, right? You might have different political views, you might have different way of social status and all these things. They're all different, but fundamentally you're all the same. And you have similar problems. Even if you're rich or poor, you still have family problems, So, and your wife kicks your butt all the time. It doesn't really change. So what people need to do is like really, be able to talk to other people everywhere, and then just kind of understand how people are very similar to you, and how you are really connected to people and in the world around you. So I think that's what's really missing these days, and that's what you really need to do, because when you travel to different countries, every time you have to make new friends, and you have to make new business connections, and you have to do all. Then you start to know more and more people, and the more people more you know that everybody's kind of the same. Whether you're from Poland or you're from Japan or you're from South America, I mean, fundamentally, we're here on this earth for a very short given time, and we're trying to make the best of it, right? And we all have problems. Everybody has problems, but because everybody has problems, you can help each other because of that, and that's what's really important.
Wow. Yeah. It's crazy, but that's also my biggest takeaway from traveling is that fundamentally we are all basically the same. If you strip away like the cultural conditioning and some political views that also are usually partially, for example, a result of like natural tendencies. Like you can have more slightly more conservative or maybe slightly more liberal, or this is also ingrained. Like people forget about those things, that on some level you can change them, on some level we have some tendencies, and then we are kind of your environment shapes you. But as you said, fundamentally, like the rich person, the poor person have similar problems. The person in Argentina and Japan, they actually have fundamentally also very similar like thoughts, problems, goals in life. They also want to have a family, provide for them. They want to be a good father. If you are a man, like it doesn't really change too much, right?
Doesn't. And fundamentally, why do you have those ideologies to begin with? Why are you so conservative? Why are you so progressive? Fundamentally, it means that you want to make a better living for yourself, right? For your family. And that's what the essence of it. You want to have a progressive government because you want to be able to feed your family. You want to be able to get a job, or a lot of people talk about universal basic income or whatever. But the thing is, like, everybody fundamentally cares about the well-being of their family, and that's how they want. And then it's a tool for them to think about, how can I make myself provide. And if you're more conservative, you're libertarian or whatever it is, you want to pursue your individual goals. But why do they really want to pursue their individual goals? Maybe they're working in a certain direction that they don't want regulations, and they can really grow their business or something that they could ultimately. Why do they want that money? Also, they want to provide for their family too, right? Maybe they want to amass great amounts of wealth so that many multiple generations down the line also can be fed because of your work that you've done. So I mean, ultimately, the values deep down generally are the same, and I don't think that really changes a whole lot. You just have a different tool, or you think about a different tool based on your environment that you're in, the work environment that you're in, and you make that kind of decision. So one person who lives in Poland could be the same person, but you might have a different ideology of somebody in Argentina, just because your political and financial landscape is different. So you have to really be able to kind of cut through all that superficial things and look at people in its real natural form, and think about what drives them. Why are they here? What do they want? And I think that's really what's important to know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's the thing, right? Like that most people are not able now. That's the problem. I feel like to have even like normal conversations. Like we are so kind of, I don't know, far out from this world. We only know like the social media and stuff. But like in real world, that we, most people without like maybe some substances like alcohol or I don't know, smoking weed or whatever, they're not able to kind of throw away that superficial stuff and just like connect on a deeper level, just like normal, human connection, like me and you talking like me today, like we don't share that. Like for some weird reason, like it's maybe not weird. There's like things you can look at, like why it happened, but I think that that's like a really huge thing, is that people like without those substances, they just somehow not able to throw it away, and then you're not able to look at people, for what they really are. And then one thing that you said also is that about like people who are maybe like those digital nomads or whatever you call them, or people who just travel and they live in different places. um yeah, while it's true that those people learn and learn the perspective, but also a lot of those people also have this problem of being like lonely when they go, because if you don't like really force yourself into it, then people are not gonna do it for you. And a lot of I think like digital nomads or like entrepreneurs who are like location independent, they go somewhere, but they have a problem of this like social circle, like they become kind of lonely because they're in new culture, everything, and it's all super foreign, and you don't have any friends there, and it becomes quite lonely.
Well, I mean, if you don't like that, then it's probably not the life for you, right? So even as an entrepreneur, you're throwing yourself into a very different environment, and if you can't accept that there's other people in this world that you're not accustomed to, and you can't be the best salesman, or you can't do this and that, then that's something that you should really take it to heart and say, well, if you can't make new friends, if you can't adjust, be flexible as a human being, then it's not really for you, to be honest. And I think that's a really important quality to have, and it's not something to be depressed over. If you just find that, if you're wanting to live in Bali or some other place because there's a lot of digital nomads and you can't even make friends there, then go back, and start all over. I mean, it wasn't for you, right? You don't have to push yourself into a mold where you don't even fit in. So go back and go back to your own life. I mean, there's no difficulties in deciding to do that. I mean, as I said, life is always short. Do what's best for you, and if you can't challenge yourself, or if that's the challenge that you thought you couldn't break through, then no problem, pivot. That's kind of what's you got to be flexible.
So you think being flexible is very important, and like being able to pivot and not getting stuck with one thing, just trying things out?
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain level of drive that you need to try to get into a certain mold that I was talking about. But the thing is, if it doesn't work, then you should be able to be flexible enough to make the change.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good advice. Hope people are taking notes. and and speaking of like one thing when it comes to, because I asked you about Japan, but one also country that you've lived for quite a long time, and I'm really kind of curious about, because I know a little bit about it, is Singapore, because I know it's a very like interesting country in the way they run things, the way things look on the street, the way things like super neat in order. So what do you? I guess you've stayed in Singapore, so you must love something there. So what is it that you like about Singapore, living in Singapore? Like, what do you think the government and the society or life, like what are some really great aspects of living there? Maybe for some people who've never been there and maybe heard about it or never heard about it.
Yeah, it's a very multi-ethnic society. So you have the majority who are ethnically Chinese, and then you have the original Malays, and you have the Indian Tamils that were brought over by the British during their occupation here. And then has grown into an international hub. So you have people like me from Japan or all over Asia. You have people from Europe, in the U.S. and South America, so you have kind of it's a mini map of the world inside Singapore, which I really enjoy, and I think it's a great environment for my kids as well to be able to immerse with so many different nationalities and different cultures, and be able to accept that there are differences, of people and different ways of values and ideas, which is great. I mean, if I had to live in Japan, then there's only one Japanese way, right? And everybody is Japanese, very homogeneous society. The society makes you think a certain way, and you have to be that certain person. And it's not really the environment that I want for my kids. So yeah, so I think it's a great place to be. I mean, obviously, I miss Four Seasons. I miss that. It's a small country, so there's not much of a domestic travel. But I guess when COVID's over, then we could start traveling again. And Southeast Asia is at your doorstep. Every place, major city or travel location in Southeast Asia is about like two hours away at most. So it's a great place to be, and I feel that there's a tremendous amount of growth in the Southeast Asian territory, and it's definitely going to be much bigger than it was before. And I love the vibe that I'm feeling from that.
Mm. Yeah, I was living in Vietnam this year for like 4 months.
Oh,
So
yeah, it's a very energetic city. I feel like the country sucks out my energy when I leave Vietnam, to be honest.
yeah.
Yeah.
Why
I
is
don't know.
that?
I was always exhausted after going to Vietnam. There's so much movement,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, I'm quite tired after I leave.
Because like Singapore is like I think famous for this like very kind of strict and orderly way, right? Like that you can't even like everything is super neat and tidy, and you can't throw a gum on the pavement. So do you see that this is mostly an upside, or do you think there's also like downsides to that kind of
Yeah.
like
So
how is the it's like the government, like do you think it's a well governed country like with a really good future, or how do you
yeah,
look at
it's
it?
definitely a well-governed country. I mean, the society functions very well because of that. It's a very authoritative government. I'm not saying like it's like China or North Korea, but it's very the government's quite controlling compared to other kind of countries around this neighborhood. But I think that being a city state, it helps them be able to maintain a certain stability in that country, and then because it's driven like a or it's governed like a business, it does very well in commerce. So it's been able to grow from a tiny little city into a mega important financial hub of the world in a very short amount of decades. So I think that it has its definitely had its really good pros of being a somewhat controlling government. But of course, being individualistic myself as well, I don't like that governments dictate on what you can do and what you can't do on a very microscopic level, like chewing gums or spitting on a street or whatever it is. So that I always see as the country grows and matures to a certain level, then I can suspect that there will be people wanting to a bit more freedom from the government than how it is now.
I see. Okay, no, that's a good perspective. Um yeah, I'm just always like kind of interested of how people, especially people who have like in their experience, because I think unfortunately a lot of people in the world have opinion about certain places without ever being there, and they are usually very one dimensional, like for example, I don't know, the press in US, there's usually only maybe like one newspaper or whatever, like one journal or online site that would write the news about Poland, because it's like not very relevant. So
Hmm.
you only get one perspective, and but that's the only perspective, for example, most people get, and then they say like, oh, Poland, and here it's like communism basically now, and it's like we have no rights. and
That's quite
then
antiquated.
say again.
Yeah, that's pretty antiquated view of Poland, isn't it?
Yeah. But no, but like because for example, they take out like one event that happened, like some protest or whatever, and then they show one view, because normally like when it comes to domestic stuff, you get all kinds of views, and then you can hopefully make up your own mind. But when you have, about those like distant countries, it's usually like kind of like one perspective. On South America, it's the same. When I was going to, or Central America, it's going to travel there, it was always, like, oh, it's you're gonna get killed there, because all that happens there is just like, just Uzi and Glocks and like and drugs. That's all there is. But when you go there, it's like totally different. So that's why I'm, super interesting to always hear someone who's actually been somewhere long enough. Because if you just go somewhere for a week, I think it doesn't give also usually a very good reflection. So that's why I was so interested in like to hear from you about, like, for example, Singapore, or how it
Yeah,
really is to live there.
yeah. I mean, overall, I don't have any complaints. Obviously, I do feel like I want to explore myself a lot more outside of the government control, but that's a little sacrifice I do for the growth of my family and the business as well. Let me ask you a question. So my wife is Uruguayan, and
Oh,
Uruguay
nice.
is very similar to Argentina in some sense. And I've never had any view of Uruguay before I married or started going out with my wife, then girlfriend. Other than the predecessor of the WTO was called GATT, and they had a meeting in Uruguay once, and that's kind of how I remembered it. Or if you're into football, I guess some people know Uruguay
Yeah.
as a tough competitor in the World Cup, but most of the time nobody really knows about Uruguay. Um, but how do you see Argentina as a society? Because it's a very mix of Italian and Spanish uh, roots, and the overall view of most people are, yes, it's like corrupt and it has multiple bankruptcies, and there's always some kind of destable society in general. I mean, how was your experience being there?
Well, I think there's just two sides to the coin. So I think one is like, how are the people, and then how is the country. I think these
Yeah,
are
it's
like
so
kind of
different.
separate. I think the people are the best I've met, and the society is at least for me, it's like my favorite way of how people, interact, how it all looks, like how, I don't know, I just love everything about it. Like the way it's still maybe like, probably Europe, like many many years ago, when people would actually, talk to each other, go out, meet, they have the mate, which I love, and they like, pass it around and sit and talk. So just, I love everything about that. That still got this like kind of vibe where people are very much like interconnected. And as you said, it's got this interesting mix where it's like, yeah, like very big Italian influence, but then there was also like Polish people who escaped there, Russian, and like this kind of Eastern Europe. um so like the mix is definitely, but the mix is, it's not, I think it's been there for such a long time that it's not a problem at all. Like because it's like kind of, already quite a few generations. So now it's all like Argentinians. But I think that the other side to the coin is that, yeah, the country is very much unstable. But unfortunately, or fortunately, or how you look at it, it's it's kind of separate. Like the economy is, I think. You could talk conspiracy or not. I mean, I just heard enough things to know that, there's other governments just playing around with the governments in South America and Central America, and that makes a lot of those countries unstable. So I think it's just like, and then the government makes it unstable, and then the economy crashes, people are becoming poor and stuff. But like, when you are there, you're like, how is this not country rich? That's this big thing, right? How is this country not rich? They have everything. They are beautiful. They have so much land. They have so many minerals. They have, animals. They have, the best steaks. They could export so many things. Like it's all then the economy wars and, the political wars that kind of make Argentina what it is now. And I think in general, South and Central America. But I think the society, as just a society, as people, and how the normal life, everyday life looks like there, it's I this is where I want to live. So for me, it's beautiful because it's got this, this togetherness, but there is also the individual. So it's kind of like this cool mix, and they all love music. They love playing guitar. They, like, so many people play instruments there. So it's got this vibe that's very. I haven't really found it in many other places in the world, and it's still kind of like developed country already, because there are some that have this, but are, like, let's go to Guatemala or something. It's like, it's still quite wild there, to live there.
When the country's as destabilized or having these kind of problems, you actually see the true nature of a lot of people. I mean, they do help each other out quite a lot, right? And that's what I found about Uruguay as well. I mean, politically and economically, it's quite stable now, but you find that culture itself is more about human relationships and human values, family values, and I like that quite a lot, because we find that a lot of that in the Western world, or even Japan too. You're starting to kind of lose that closeness, the connectivity of people, and I feel that people there, pretty much across Latin America as well, and maybe you can add Spain and Italy and a lot of the Mediterranean countries in there as well. But that strong connectivity of people is something that we're definitely losing, and it's whenever I go there. Uruguay is a country where there's really nothing. There's not that much tourism, and beach is not that great, even though they rave about it. And it's a very natural country where you just go and people just hang out, and that's like the pastime, right? Just hanging out, coffee, mate, whatever it is. You go to the beach, just hang out and just pass time. It's not about going shopping. It's not about going to this place and that place, and then, no, it's not. You just go to the park, hang out, and then that's kind of the value. And then I feel like, yeah, I think we need to go back to the how we were like that. I think a lot of societies were like that before, and we just kind of, in the name of progression, we've completely lost all of that, and we hyper rationalize things too much, and we lowered the human values, or kind of the connectivity of people, less and less, and that's why I feel like there's so many problems in this world.
Yeah. Then you put like success to the top, above all costs and things like that, and then you, for example, don't value something like now. You don't value something like being a good person. Like, I feel like I don't know. It's just, I had a realization lately. I'm like, damn. Like, I think we're at this point where, like, no one really cares so much if you're actually a good person. Like, yeah, one, success, but are you actually a good person? Like, did you do it, scamming people? Did you do it, hurting people? Did you do, um, doing bad things to other people? Then, I mean, I would never think it as it worth it, because, like, ultimately that's all it comes down to, like, how you feel about yourself, right? Like, if you become successful, but you made all these things through, like, kind of killing the souls of other people in a way,
Yeah.
then what good is it? Like, you're gonna be miserable for the rest of your life, because you can't really, like, delete it from your life. You can drink or you can do something, but we forgot that this is actually what it's all about, like, being a good person. And I think those people, as you said, like in Uruguay, I heard a lot about Uruguay too, that it's yeah, it's just this simplicity. I love just this simplicity. Like, these are countries that are not like, people living in a jungle, but they still kind of still maintain that simplicity of life. And in that simplicity, they just find, like, this connection, beauty, and they still, and they're just more happy. Like, that's the I guess that's why I love it. I think that's kind of, like, people that are just more happy. Like, whatever you want to say about them, are they poorer, or they, have more money, or they have this or that or this or that, but they're just more happy. Isn't that what most of us want?
Exactly, and it shows how much the ideas of success or monetary success or all these things that we're kind of fed that we need in life is such a myth, and it's such a a wrong thing to aspire to. Obviously, and your listeners are all entrepreneurs, so obviously you want business success, obviously, but in not in sacrifice of dehumanizing yourself, right? And if you look at all these people that entrepreneurs now are idolizing, whether it be Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or whatever, they're all sociopaths. They're not they're not nice people. And why do we idolize these people who are not nice people? And I think that's the wrong thing, because everybody's looking at money, business success as most important over human values. And what I would like to see more in this entrepreneurship world is that we do bring human values into the forefront of whatever we do. It's not, we don't need another social app, or we don't need a bunch of softwares anymore. I think what we need is something that it makes something better for our society. Not just convenience, but something that we can make our life better. Whether it be sustainable businesses, or kind of replacing plastics, or anything that you could think of that we think that we can do better in society. And I wish that more people would choose that over just making money or flipping businesses, because it's blitz scalable. And I think that we need to idolize people more that has a better human value.
Mm. So what are some values that you kind of follow for yourself, and maybe you would kind of share with other people that they may kind of incorporate in their life? Do you have some like ones, or?
No, I mean, I've been talking about it across this whole episode with you. I think I've been talking about compassion,
Mhm.
and thinking about others, and creating a more human-based, well, not human-based. It sounds very human-centric, but it's based on more of what is not rationalistic, and what is not materialistic, what is not super scientific. Like, let's not make everything so logical. And I think that what we need is more of the emotional side, and we talk about this quite a lot. Like, let's say, the artificial general intelligence, we're going to have this no matter what. I mean, we might be talking about decades ahead, but the thing is, if we're creating all these machines that are going to be hyper rational, and they're going to make better judgments in certain areas than us, and we're going to be replacing ourselves with those rational thinking, because they probably do it better than us, then what do we have left? We
Yeah.
only have emotions left. We only have this human values left for us to really take a look at it and nurture and make it better, right? And I think it's about time now that we start looking at this better, because if really artificial intelligence and general intelligence is going to be better, they're going to make better businesses, they're going to make better policies, they're going to make better financial judgments than we do. We could just let them do all these things anyway, and we're just going to be left with whatever we're going to be good at, and what we're good at is being human. That's all we got. So
Mm.
I think that's what we need to figure out, is like, can we make businesses, or can we put value in in the betterment of ourselves, the planetary values. I think that's what's most important.
Mm. That's beautifully said. I agree. I agree. Um, so maybe as one of the last kind of topics, can you tell us a little bit about your like project of the podcast, the Future Design Podcast? Like what's your goal with it? I think partially people already know, because we talked about it, about the society and things like that, but maybe you can share like what's your, maybe there's like something you haven't mentioned, and like what are you trying to do with the podcast? What's your goal?
Mm.
Because you said it's not for now bringing any profit, so.
Yeah, sure. I mean, ultimately what I'm doing is trying to create more awareness that we're going to have all these technologies, just as I said about artificial general intelligence and IoT and many things that can create our society utopian or dystopian. But we're going to be equipped with so much technology, but we as human beings are so fragile, so unstable, so insecure, so much full of flaws that are we going to really take these advanced technologies when we as human beings have not developed in a much in a similar scale as technology? So uh, we need to really think about, what are the things that we need to improve on as human beings, right? And we think about spirituality, and we think about connectivity with the rest of the planet and sentient beings. And we try to think about, improving, advancing ourselves so that when we do have these technologies in our hands, what are we going to do with it? Because technology is here to make a better society for ourselves, and but if it falls into the wrong hands, it could be completely different. And so the logo for my, well, not the logo, the catchphrase for my podcast is create sorry, is challenge the norm, create a better future.
Okay.
And yeah, so I talk about what are the existing systems that we have in our life. We can talk about, like, let's say, success. Is success really the most important things? Or, what are these things that we are so accustomed to, the consumer habits? It could be, many different things that we take for granted, that it's kind of normal to us. And let's challenge each one of those and think about what should we leave behind, and what should we make it better, so that we can create a better future. So that's kind of what I would like to talk about. And I have two different series in this podcast. I call it Xterra and Intera. So Intera, it works on our spiritual selves. So we think about what kind of ideas and concepts that could improve ourselves. And the Xterra talks about the manifestation of those ideas. So it goes into artificial general intelligence. It could go into IoT. It could be, sustainable ability projects. I mean, these things are some things that can use to make our society better.
Mm, nice. That's a beautiful kind of goal. So what was going through your mind when you were first like creating it? Like what? Because it's such a, it's cool. Like everyone is creating podcasts now, but you also know that it's very long term, and you never know if it's gonna really work. And it's kind of like a passion project. So like, what was going through your mind when you were first like starting it?
Yeah, I mean, initially I just wanted to connect with a lot of people who are spiritual, doing something really exciting in the world. And obviously, in my mind, it pivoted a couple times to make my ideas a bit more narrow as I progressed. Now I'm in so the main series is in the 35th now on Monday. And I've done a different series on during the COVID quarantine time. I did 20 of those. So now I have 55 episodes out, and during that time I changed a little bit here and there to tweak it to find my own niche and my own voice in it. But now I feel like I'm quite there, trying to be more vocal about how to shed ourselves with all these baggage that we've been carrying around that we haven't even noticed, and step into the future where we can be better. We can make this planet better. We don't have to fly to Mars to create another colony. So those kind of things that really think about. And I think that's kind of rooted also with the reason why I wanted to do blockchain as well. I mean, initially I thought maybe I should do a blockchain podcast, but there's so many of them out there. But the idea behind the blockchain itself is it's trying to help people. And my altruistic view on starting that kind of business is can be spread out into different technologies. And I think there's a lot of people, like-minded people, who are thinking the same. So I wanted to get them onto the podcast and share their views and share their manifestations.
Mm, nice. And so how what's like for you the most surprising thing that you didn't expect about podcasting, like before you went into it, and now after you've done like 55 episodes, say?
Initially, I thought, I'll be interviewing a lot of people in Singapore, but because of this COVID, I've moved on to doing on Zoom, like we're doing right now, and I've been able to reach out to so many different people across the world and making new connections, and hopefully a lot of them are long-lasting relationships. And that in itself is something surprising thing, and I didn't think that would last this long, obviously. And I think this is something that I would love to keep trying because it is a passion project, and even if it doesn't bring any money, I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because I want to create connections. I want to learn new things. Every time I do an episode, especially on the Xterra series, I read and consume a lot of knowledge just for me to prepare for those episodes, and that keeps me challenged to learn new things. Next week I got to interview this person, so I got to read up two different books and Google search all these things before I interview them because I'm gonna start sounding stupid when I interview them. So these things keeps me on my toes and challenge myself.
Yeah, like I think it's not maybe talked enough yet. Maybe that like actually interviewing people or like doing podcasts. It's also learning for yourself. Like that's a big part of it, right? Like you talk to these people and you open your mind and you talk with them, and then it makes you think, and then you incorporate some of these ideas or thoughts, or um, they just kind of reshape you. It's not just it's just not for, it's not only for other people, and it's not only to become famous, it's also just to learn something for yourself and open yourself to different perspectives,
Totally. I mean, if you're doing it for fame and money, then you should go do something else because this ROI is so low.
Yeah, so that's a good maybe, I hope people are listening, if a podcast, and I think YouTube kind of the same. Like if you're
Pretty
doing it
much.
for fame and money, that's maybe not the best route. Like it's the chance of it happening is very, very low, but shouldn't mean you doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
Of course. I mean, as I said, for any business, sports, music, podcast, whatever it is, if you have the passion to do it, and if that's your main driver, then it doesn't matter whatever comes with it. So,
Hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
keep on trying.
That's, I think that's one very beautiful note to end this podcast on. I mean, we are getting very close to 2 hours. But before we wrap this up, I wanted to ask you more of like an open-ended question, which you usually ask, which is, what are some kind of your last thoughts? Maybe either you want to maybe summarize kind of some of your points, or maybe say something that I haven't asked you and you wanted to kind of mention, and then maybe just let people know where they can find you and your podcast. That's going to be also useful, because there's probably people who are watching and would want to know more about you, more about what you do.
Yeah, I think, I've explained quite a lot, but I think really we're at this point where we need some certain spiritual awakening so that, we can create better businesses, we can create a better society, and we have to think about all these things, the norms that we have with the narratives of life that we need to deconstruct and think about how we can make this thing better. And I just don't want to hear so much negativity in this world, and we need to hear more things that are positive. We have to create positivity in this world, and I think that doesn't come from change makers, it comes from everybody. And that's what I want the podcast, for your podcast as well, to talk to people and get those ideas out. And I wish you, Konrad, all the success and reaching out to as many people as possible. You can follow me on Twitter, on there, Taka Shibayama. I have a website for my podcast. It's fdpod.co. fdpod.co. You can find my show notes, free monthly and weekly newsletter. All the podcasts are in there as well. So yeah, I'm very engaging. Anybody who wants to talk to me, happy to talk. And yeah, feel free to reach out.
Nice. Okay, that's perfect. For me, the conversation was great. I think we touched on many topics, and all the way from some like mental models for business and Wall Street to like society and what things could be improved. What are some good things about like what are the differences between the Western culture and the and kind of the Eastern culture of Asia, and then also South America. What are some, good points we can take away from each of them, and then maybe combine to our everyday life and to our, um, how we live everyday life, wherever we are, doesn't matter, because we can always change how we approach the people that are near us, right? And you also said, and we also talked about, blockchain and kind of the momentum of it and where it's going. So I personally am excited about it, and how people also got some unique perspective on blockchain from you. And yeah, it was great talking to you, Taka.
Yeah,
I
likewise.
love your idea with your podcast. I also hope that you get more and more, you spread the word, get more interesting guests, and more, I mean, like more and more of those interesting guests and more listeners to that. And hopefully, people like you can slowly, and me, I guess now too, like slowly tip the scale to more the positivity, more human connection, more more like normal discussion, and just finding kind of common ground rather than uh, you know being divided.
Certainly. Yeah. Thank you for having me on this podcast, and all the listeners, thank you for listening all the way to the end.